I'm Wendy, and I'm very much an alcoholic. Um, yeah, my higher power has got a very weird and wonderful sense of humor. Like Warren said, I really tried hard to get somebody else to share today, and I had no takers whatsoever. When my 8-year Thanksgiving was, which was on the 4th of July, we were on holiday, so I missed out then, thank goodness. But yeah, it always comes back to get me, because I tend to bully everybody else into sharing, and karma, as they say, is a real bitch. Yeah, this morning, Peter was very, very keen to get me here on time, so he woke me up at 6 o'clock, much to my disgust. But he did have a cup of coffee in hand, so I forgave him. Yeah, thanks to my higher power for another year of clean and free and happy, joyous living. I'm here despite myself. The only reason I'm here is because of the fellowship, the people in these rooms, my higher power, and this awesome, awesome program that I try and practice to the best of my ability every day. I'm not going to go too far into the war stories, but I wasn't a very big drinker. In fact, I just tested this stuff. I never wanted to be in a position where I didn't know what I did the day before. I didn't want to lose control. And my grandfather was an alcoholic, and he landed up in a drunk tank, which I went to go and visit him once, and it was such a horrible experience that I vowed I never wanted to touch booze ever again, or ever. I mean, I was only about 10 or 11 at the time. And then I married a man who felt it was his God-given right to have Friday night out with the boys, and he'd come home drunk, and it used to really, really piss me off. And again, I never ever, in fact, it was so bad I wouldn't even go into a bottle store to buy him beers. And I didn't touch a drink myself. However, when my dad was dying of cancer, I used to have an occasional glass of wine, and I didn't really like it because it used to make me sleepy. So I didn't really like the stuff. But when my dad was dying of cancer, I started getting, my alcoholic behavior started becoming quite obvious. I'd go and spend a week or so with my mom to help with my dad, and she'd have a glass or two of wine, and off she'd go to bed. Me, on the other hand, I'd stay up until the cast was finished, and then get to the shop early the next morning to replace it, so my mom didn't know how much I'd been drinking. Peter was down here, so he was unaware of what I was up to. And then, then also on top of that, it was sleeping pills, which I used to pop like Smarties. I had 3 doctors, 4 chemists, and I always used to make sure I had a stash. And before Peter took me into the house on the hill, he was horrified to discover my little bag of pills, because he just thought I was ill. Sure. I was ill, but not in the way he thought. I didn't even realize myself that I had a disease of alcoholism. I did try on numerous occasions to give up on my own, because I used to drink in isolation. I used to have bottles stashed all around the house. And my son was the first one, my younger son was the first one to start making observations of my behavior. And when Peter would say something to me the day before, and then he'd repeat it, say, remember what I said yesterday? I'd always just try and skate through by the seat of my pants, agreeing with whatever it was he said, even if I didn't know what he was talking about. I went into the house on the hill in 2008. When I got up there, the only thing I'd packed was shoes. And I got there in my gown. And if Brian was here, he would tell you it was a funky gown. It was awful. I was totally unaware of what I was I was doing. Prior to that, Peter thought I'd had a stroke, and he'd taken me to Cherry Biden, who I love dearly, because if it wasn't for her, I would never have found out about the house on the hill. And she said to Peter, Wendy hasn't had a stroke, she's high. Because I hadn't been drinking, but I'd been taking sleeping pills and anti-abuse. And because of the combination, I was throwing up horribly, so I was totally gaga. Anyway, we ended up to go and visit the house on the hill to go and see if it's the kind of place that would help me. And the first person we met was Brian. And he said to us, he's an alcoholic, and I looked at this man and I thought, well, how on earth are you going to help me? Because I didn't realize at the time that it takes one alcoholic to help another to get this. A normal person wouldn't understand. And they wanted me to go in almost immediately, and we'd had our holiday coming up that Friday, and I said, no, I think we should go on holiday first. And both Peter and Brian said, no, we think you should come here first. So being the kind of bullies that they are, I land up in a rehab at the ripe old age of 50. Well, just after my 50th birthday. And my journey began from there. I hated it. I found it really, really difficult. It was the first time I'd been away from my home and Peter and my family for such a long time. So I found it really, really hard. I hated the bell. Everything, you guys know, groups, meals, walks, even waking up is this damn bell. And it drove me nuts. Concern groups, oh boy, they were fun. Although I must admit I got a lot of growth out of it. I didn't have that many, but the ones I did, they were really, really nasty. I was there for 2 months, and I decided, well, I could go home because I lived in Scarborough. I could go home, do my steps at home, and still report back to Annie. And I said, okay, I'm leaving now. And they said, no. So I had a reality group, and all my peers told me why they thought I shouldn't leave. I had some good advice, and I had some what I thought was bad advice because they thought I should stay and I thought I should go. And I dug in my heels and I decided I was going to go. And this went on for I think it was the longest group that I'd been in. It went on for 20 minutes with everybody trying to talk me out of it, and I was just sitting there, stubborn as I can be, and dug in my heels. And suddenly I had this epiphany. And I thought to myself, why are you being such a hard ass? You've got a month to go. It's 3 months out of your life. Stay. So I decided to stay. It's the first time in my entire life I've ever seen Keith at a loss for words. I really enjoyed that part. So I stayed on for another month. But however, 2 weeks before my due date to leave, during this time my brother had been dying of cancer. And 2 weeks before I was due to leave, I decided no, I had to get out so I could go and see my brother before he died. And I went and I spoke to Annie, who was my sponsor at the time, and I said to her, I need to go. I've done my steps. I know what I'm doing. I've only got 2 weeks to go. My brother's dying. I need to be with him. And sneaky woman that she is, she phoned Peter. And the next thing I knew, Peter was there. And in he walked, looking very disturbed and very worried about his poor little wife who'd been locked up for 2.5 months. And basically, Peter said no. So I stayed there for the rest of another 2 weeks, and I was so glad that I did. Because living in the small town of Scarborough, the people from the house wouldn't have been able to speak to me, and I didn't want that. I also knew that another 2 weeks out of 3 months was not a big deal. So I agreed with everybody, and funny enough, I thought I'd go to, because I'd packed my bag and everything, I was ready to go. I thought by the time I got back to my room, I'd be resentful, and I wasn't. I was actually glad that they'd all said no, especially him. Anyway, coming into recovery and living in this town has been a godsend. In the October 2007, before we were living in Uvongo, and a whole lot of sequences landed us up in Skopera. For me, that was a God instance, because 9 months later, I found myself up in a rehab. And I was so, so grateful that I was there. And that was the first rehab I'd been to that had this program, because for me, this program is the only thing that works. I'm passionate about it. I love this program. I love this fellowship. I've made so many friends, good friends, in Skopera, and even those that have left, I can still pick up the phone if I've got a problem, if I can't get hold of my sponsor, and speak to them. And there's always somebody there that will help. For the first 4 years, I managed not to have any sponsees. I had a couple, but they didn't last very long. And about 4 years ago, I started getting serious sponsees. I had a few of them that almost made a year, and then they stopped listening, and off they went. And then the last 2 years, Warren being the first one, they came thick and fast. And I get so much growth and enjoyment out of my sponsees. 4 of them are doing steps, and because I'm having to read their steps and go through them, I'm remembering the stuff that I did when I did my step work in the house on the hill. So the last year I've really had a lot more growth than usual. I've actually had a very easy recovery. I haven't really had difficulties. I didn't lose my home. I didn't lose my family. I didn't have a job to lose because I've still got it. I'm a home executive, so I'm on duty 24/7, and it doesn't pay very well. But since coming into recovery, I've suddenly discovered that there's things I really, really enjoy doing. I started fabric painting. I went back to pottery. I do service. I love doing service. I love going to meetings. I always get a buzz out of meetings. For me, going to meetings is my high. I don't think I've ever been to a meeting where I haven't got something out of someone's share. There's always something I can relate to, which I find is so awesome, because, I mean, you could go to a party of normal people and everybody be talking, and I would not relate to anything. To me, they'd all be, quite a lot of the time, they'd be drinking, so they'd probably be talking crap anyway. But I always get some sort of pearl out of the shares that I hear when I go to meetings. I've been going to the same meetings every week for the last 8 years. I never miss a meeting unless I've got a migraine or I'm on holiday. Other than that, if I don't go to one of my meetings, I feel deprived. I feel like I'm missing out on something for the day. Sorry, I'm umming a lot. I've lost track of thought. Also when I was in the rehab, my youngest son, Jared, he refused to speak to me. He wanted nothing to do with me. He wouldn't even ask Peter how I was doing. He would never send his love, and I never thought I'd get back what I had with him. And these days, I've actually got a better relationship with my son and my other 2 kids than I ever had before, because I'm there, I'm present. Before, my brain would always be going over the place. Sometimes I'm still not there because I'm busy playing Candy Crush, and that really pisses him off, and Peter, because they'll talk, and I'll say, yeah. And then you'll say, did you hear what I said? And I say, yeah. Not a clue. So that's something I really have to work on. For me, one of the gifts of recovery was getting my memory back. Something I really try and do is to remember people's names, because I remember when I first came into the rooms, Frank was one of the first people. He's actually here today. Frank was one of the first people I met outside of the rehab, and he greeted me, and every time I went to go to that meeting, he'd always say my name, and he'd always say hello, and he'd always give me a hug. And because of that, it's something I try and do today, because I know how much it meant to me to have my name remembered and to get that hug, because in the treatment center, you're not allowed to hug. I remember when my brother passed away when I was in the treatment center, I was so grateful that I was where I was, because I know if I'd gone to the funeral, I probably would have picked up a drink. In fact, I know I would have picked up a drink, and I would have grabbed sleeping pills, because that was my coping mechanism for any sort of upset in my life. To this day, 8 years later, my sister-in-law, who was then married to my brother that passed away, doesn't speak to me. We're friends on Facebook, but we don't talk, because she still resents the fact that I didn't come to my brother's funeral. And for me, I'd said everything I had to say to my brother. He was never affected by my drinking, because they were up in Joburg, we were down here. And I'd made peace with it, and he, I think 2 weeks before, or a week before I was due to come out, he said to me, "You just stay where you are." When I spoke to him on the phone, because I used to phone him every weekend when I used to come out on the Sunday afternoon before I went back to the rehab. And for me, that was more important than going to support my sister-in-law. I mean, we never really liked each other. In fact, I couldn't stand the bitch, but I used to put up with her. I used to put up with her because of my brother. And so it's something I've actually let go, because how she feels about me is not my business. One thing that did affect me quite a lot when I came into recovery was I had a school friend we'd been friends since grade 7. She came over from the UK, and we clicked straight away. The year before I went into rehab, her son went into rehab in the UK. Well, he went back there. She was still here in Joburg. And he came out just after I got out of rehab and came to visit them for 6 weeks. And unknown to them, he was still using. And he went back to the UK and committed suicide. And since that day, she's never spoken to me. It really bothered me for, I'd say, about 2 years. And my sponsor and Peter kept on saying to me, "You can't force it, let it go." And I found that really hard to let go, because we'd grown up together and we'd gone through a lot together. She wasn't able to have, she battled to fall pregnant, and I used to go with her for her fertility drug injections, and it was one of those friendships I didn't have to speak to for a month, and I could pick up the phone. It was like we'd never stopped talking every day. So that was one of the things that that really worried me in the beginning, but I've learned to accept the fact that it's God's will, that she has her own journey, and she can no longer be a part of mine for whatever reason. I don't think I have very, very much to add, except that this program gave me a new way of life. It's given me happiness, it's given me serenity. And if anybody has any doubts that this program works, if it can work for me, it can work for anybody. Thanks for letting me share.